Hi everybody, this is Brian Baker for the Conspiracy Crush podcast YouTube channel. I'm doing a debunking of this video that was shared with me with a sarcastic little quip attached to it. Of course, it is Twitter, and I watched it and I was really fascinated by it. I mean, this is a great example of how selective editing and taking people out of context can be used to manipulate folks into believing what you want them to believe. And in this case, the person who edited this wanted the people who viewed it to believe that there is a giant conspiracy. I think the overarching title is The Great Reset, that's being instituted by leaders around the world, but this is very Canada-centric. It focuses on Canadian leadership, and WEF, so World Economic Forum members, and that the Great Reset is basically taking your rights away, creating a dystopian future where you have no owner, you own nothing, you are nothing. It really is a terrifying prospect that they're putting onto our table and saying, look, oh my God, you better be scared, you better be terrified, because this is coming. And unless you listen to us and more people that are saying the stuff we're saying, it is bound to happen, and you are a sheep and you are going to suffer because of it. So yeah, very terrifying. I will say that I do know a bit about this. I was, as some of you may know who know a little bit about my background, I was a conspiracy theorist back at the beginning of YouTube. I got sucked in by a bunch of Alex Jones videos. I believed I was a 9/11 truther. I was a peak oil guy, and I remember the terror. You know, I remember when I first went down that rabbit hole, being so terrified that the world is not what I thought it was. You know, that there could be this people out there that are trying to undermine us and take our rights away, and you know, that these people are actual leaders, that our leaders aren't protecting us from people, you know, countries like China and Russia or what have you. They are the ones that are doing this as part of a grand cabal, sort of like a James Bond movie. So anyways, I did believe all that, and it took me a while to dig my way out of it. One of the things that I realized that really gave me a better perspective was that first of all, the world is way more complicated than that. The world is not conspiratorial; it is competitive. So yeah, there's millionaires and billionaires and leaders of countries and corporations, and many of them are fighting for control, of course, but everyone wakes up not knowing what the fuck is going to happen next. This video is fascinating because it really is, like I said, edited to terrify the shit out of you, and using you know, selective editing, taking leaders out of context, peppering in thought leaders, people from the WEF. They really do create an overall narrative, and I want to sort of debunk it and break it down as we watch it so that you get a sense for the kinds of things that they're trying to do. So I'm just going to start this here, and I'll be stopping and starting quite regularly just to sort of put in my 2 cents as it goes on. So here we go.
Change is imperative, but it's on us to flip the switch.
So the Great Reset, right? So the assumption, it's out of context. We don't actually know what he's talking about. I'm a news junkie, and I've seen Trudeau do a bunch of speeches. I don't recognize this one, World Economic Forum. So, but just some overarching approaches. So the text at the bottom is being used to tie it all together into a single narrative so that it looks like it's all flowing. So it looks like it's all part of one unit telling the same story. And it brings it together in a way that will allow us to digest the narrative that they're trying to give us. Remember, these things are taken out of context in order to leave us with a sense for the meaning that they want us to have. And the context of the video itself is that this is proof that our leaders are trying to bring us toward a communism, Marxism, a dystopian future. So if you come in, like all perspectives, if you come in with a glass half empty, looking for the proof of something that you might already believe or worry about, you will see it in this. But when you come at it as someone like me, who's been on that road and is more looking at how it's being used to manipulate me and how I'm reacting to what's being said, then you start to see that it starts to break down in common sense terms. So a little clip taken out of context at the World Economic Forum. What a great way to start. He's the Prime Minister of Canada, and he's telling everybody at this secretive meeting how they're going to take over the world, I suppose.
What the fourth industrial revolution will lead to is a fusion of our physical, our digital, and our biological identities.
Et au bout de ça, on parle de plus qu'on pourra s'implanter. Ce sera quand ça?
Certainement dans les 10 années à venir. Et d'abord, on va les implanter dans nos vêtements, c'est-à-dire wearables, comme on le dit. Et après, on pourrait s'imaginer qu'on les implante dans nos cerveaux ou dans notre peau. Et à la fin, peut-être il y a une communication directe entre notre cerveau et le monde digital.
Okay, so yeah, that technology's moving fast. I guess the point I would make there is, once again, it's a bit of out of context. There's no premise put in front other than being used in the premise of this video, of course. But is he talking about this as an investor, talking to business owners, saying this is where the world is going? You know, as an investor, you're always looking for, you know, what's around the bend. You want to invest. You want to know what corporation, you know, what businesses are going down, what businesses are going up. So is he talking about this in terms of, hey, look out, guys, this is where progress is going? Or is he talking about it, as this video tries to imply, as in this is how we're planning things, right? And that's once again, if you come at this with a glass half empty as opposed to a glass half full, out of context, it can be scary. Who is this guy? Why is he trying to destroy our lives? Is essentially the implication.
Neuralink announcing it received FDA approval for its first in-human clinical trial, meaning that it will be able to test its implant in people's brains.
Talking about 6.
So on its own, right? I mean, technology is scary. Technology can be used in lots of underhanded ways. I'm going to say this a lot during this, but the reality is that unless you see legislation that is saying, okay, everyone has to have a chip now, and the legislation doesn't have anything around privacy, anything around protecting the data, then you know that there's nefarious things happening. But it's got to be legislation, right? I mean, if you look at actual authoritarian and fascist regimes in the world today, authoritarianism in the communist state of China, fascism in Russia, the ways of manipulating the population are overt. Laws that say you can't call the invasion of Ukraine a war. It's a special military operation. Laws in China saying that if you don't have a certain social credit score, you can't blank. I mean, these things are overt, and that's probably one of the biggest things to understand. Conspiracy theorists online, on Twitter, they'll say, oh, that's their plan. They're moving us toward a Marxist communist state. Even if that were true, they can't do it unless you and I vote them, go along with it. I mean, I'm on the left. There's plenty of people on the right and in the center, farther left, farther right. I will join you on the streets if they try to put in legislation that takes away our freedom of speech, our freedom of assembly, our freedom of association. In an open society, in a rule of law, in a consensus-driven democracy, it has to happen in the wide open. And that probably is the biggest reason all this stuff is bullshit. Because at the end of the day, even if Trudeau is a wannabe dictator, he can't do it. I mean, he can't. His party would never agree to it. All the people in working in government would never agree to it. The unions would never agree to it. No one would agree to it. And he is not after that. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Trudeau, but But he's an elitist in the form of a do-gooder. He's not an elitist in the form of a survival of the fittest. So as much as I don't appreciate his approach, sometimes his policies I can mostly get behind. And I know that he actually believes in Canada as a democratic country. So, I mean, that's my opinion, but you don't have to take my opinion. It's a rule of law country. He can't get away with the stuff that they're implying he's getting away with here. And we'll talk more about that later.
Earlier, which is around 2030, I would say that by then, definitely the smartphone as we know it today will not anymore be the usual kind of the most common interface. Wow. Many of these things will be built directly into our bodies.
If you choose. You know, I mean, if you choose. The implication here is that they're going to make this the reality. It's like saying that I'm going to make the reality that everyone uses the iPhone 12. No, if you choose to use that, if you want to be a cyborg, hey, the technology might exist. But, you know, if you don't want to be, in the grid, then don't do it. And that's as simple as that. It's like any other product in a capitalist system. Sure, they might make it a little bit, you know, it's like cash, right? You got to carry cash around. It's a lot easier to use tap. It's more convenient. So they try to get you to do it through convenience, but you can always use cash, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that because they get into crypto.
Pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset.
Oh my God, the reset. Okay, so now Trudeau. I think this was before maybe the Great Reset was a known sort of conspiracy theorist buzzword. But geez, what a poor. You know, the point is we don't know what the context was, right? I mean, why was he saying this is an opportunity for a reset? Maybe an opportunity to reset our approach to our crumbling healthcare system, an approach to reset our plans to bring our communities together. We don't know the context, and if his words prior to or after said time to reset the world in order to bring about a controlled system where people are taken care of by electronic systems, then I'm sure they would have included it. But no. Right there, it's all implied, and if you come at it with a glass half empty, it's easy to take it at face value. Now they go into this guy, and this guy reappears here and there. He is a big alarmist, conspiracy theorist. Look at the corner there, COVID-19, the Great Reset. So he may have been, who knows, maybe he's the guy who edited this. But in any case, he's definitely an advocate for the conspiracy theory this video tries to advance.
COVID is critical because this is what convinces people to accept, to legitimize total biometric surveillance. We need to monitor what's happening under their skin.
So, okay, so COVID is a pandemic that they have been predicting for years. Every country dealt with it in their own way. Governments around the world, the leadership was caught in a position where they don't want to be responsible for deaths. They want to cover their own ass. They want to get reelected. Threw everything into turmoil. Calling the pandemic a plan is kind of like calling a hurricane a plan, right? I mean, you deal with it. And sometimes there's positive implications for human society that can come out of it, and sometimes there's negative. But the assumption there, the glass half empty assumption, is that this is a planned approach by the global elites to get you used to the idea of tracking your health. So that's what they're implying. That's what he's implying. But it's based off the premise that COVID-19 wasn't a naturally or maybe biologically created virus that escaped. But in either case, it was a big fuckfest shit show that happened, and we're all dealing with the ramifications of it, and no one wanted it. And on the wash, it was certainly negative for the entire world. So to call it a plan by some James Bond type master villain is absolutely fucking absurd. But yet that's the implication there. If his premise is for you to believe that in order to believe this. And it continues.
Chip that it is in the tablet, and once you take the tablet and dissolves into your stomach, sends a signal that you took the tablet. So imagine the applications of that, compliance.
Okay, so I don't even know what the hell that technology is supposed to be. I'm sure people are working on it, but so what? You know, people are working on lots of technologies. He's spitballing ideas. He's spitballing stuff. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. It doesn't mean a government's going to legislate it. It doesn't mean corporations are going to see the legal liability as something they want to take on. I mean, it's just some guy spitballing, and he uses the word compliance. I'm sure that's why the guy chose the clip.
We absolutely believe that there needs to be mandatory vaccines, and there would be consequences for those who are not able to or not willing to do that.
All right, Jagman, yeah, I love that guy. So, yeah, simply talking about mandates for vaccines. It's not a global mandate. It's not a mandate for everyone in the country. It's a mandate for people doing certain jobs. So the way to think about that is that if you're in the Canadian military, you are mandated to take all the vaccines that they order you to take, because readiness and national security takes priority over your individual rights. In the case of the pandemic and the Canadian response, there are certain sectors of the economy that needed to be protected in order to protect other citizens, protecting each other. So therefore, if you're a healthcare worker, if you're a truck driver, you were mandated to take those vaccines, because if you're a healthcare worker, and since COVID-19 transmission is very much about viral load, the sicker you get, the more transmissive you are. Taking the vaccine, even if you caught COVID, you wouldn't be as transmissive because you would not have the viral load. And you're around people that are immune compromised. So you need to work, if you're working in a hospital, immune compromised people, it's to protect lives, protect people. Horrible. Horrible that it had to happen. But it was the reality. It was like the hurricane. You don't want to put, you don't want to evacuate. You don't want to put boards on your windows. It's a naturally occurring phenomenon that the government has to deal with responsibly. Everybody's looking out for their own ass. Everybody wants to save lives. Everybody's trying to do the right thing. But people can be incompetent. People can be self-serving, competitive, not conspiratorial. That's what happened. And the mandates, it's not like they mandated everyone in Canada to take the vaccine. They mandated certain critical sectors. They're not going to mandate everyone take the vaccine because everyone knew that there was a downside, that there were side effects. Some people would not react well. I had a friend that reacted very poorly to the vaccine. But it was the best of two options. COVID had a much higher chance of making you sick and die than the vaccine did, a much higher chance. So therefore the vaccine made sense. And they didn't mandate it to everybody. And if you didn't take it, and you chose not to, then guess what? You couldn't work in certain sectors. Go start a small business.
Let's have a digital health certificate acknowledged by WHO. If you have been vaccinated or tested properly, then you can move on.
Now, in the past...
Spitballing. So what? That's what he thinks you could have. Is that mandated? Is that justified? Is there government support? Is there population support? Canada and the West are consensus-driven economies, democracies. There has to be public support for this stuff.
Many tyrants and governments wanted to do it, but nobody understood biology well enough. And nobody had enough computing power and data to hack millions of people. Neither the Gestapo nor the KGB could do it. But soon, at least some corporations and governments will be able to systematically hack all the people.
That kind of stuff is terrifying. Technology is terrifying. Artificial intelligence, the biological CRISPR, being able to print out vaccines or print out viruses. I mean, this technology is crazy, but it comes back to the governments and the checks and balances within those governments to protect the people and the rule of law, the laws and legislation that are on the books to protect the people. It's not perfect. Certainly, it's still a work in progress, but it's a hell of a lot better than what they have in many countries around the world, and it's worth fighting for and holding on to. conspiracy theorists like this want to convince you that it's already the case in Canada and the United States and England, that these elites already control everything and that they're secretly bringing in these things. It's bullshit. It's impossible. Police, lawyers, prosecutors, judges, politicians all take an oath to the Constitution, to the country, to their fellow citizens. Even if 3% of them are all psychopaths that don't give a shit about anything and would go for a huge conspiracy, 97% have principles, care about the people. Their mothers live in this country. Their daughters live in this country and will live. They care. They're not just going to willy-nilly do something that is going to impact the future of their families and their country. They actually are principled. Have some faith in your fellow people, especially in the system that it's taken us decades, centuries to create, bloody stone by bloody stone. Rule of law, the scientific method, free and independent media, freedom of speech. Those things weren't just given to us by the wealthy elites. We fought for those things. And these undermining faith in those institutions we've built bloody stone by bloody stone is what will bring about the kind of tragic dystopian craziness that they're pushing us to believe is already in place. So we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly here.
The difference of this first industrial revolution is it doesn't change what you are doing. It changes you. If you take genetic editing, just as an example.
Ultimately, the mRNA vaccines are an example for that cell and gene therapy. I always like to say, if we had surveyed 2 years ago in the public, would you be willing to take a gene or cell therapy and inject it into your body, we would have probably had a 95% refusal rate.
So there you go. I mean, so he's making a point that people would probably have refused the mRNA vaccine potentially before COVID. Maybe that's the case. But just because that's the case doesn't mean the vaccine didn't work. And before that, gene editing, those types of technologies are pretty freaky. But those types of things can't just happen on the down low, right? I mean, these things happen. We live in a free society with universities that have double-blind studies, scientific method that protects us from the bullshit. And you can't have a conspiracy that has thousands of different departments that are all testing these experimental things, know the science, look into it. And like I said, it's competitive, not conspiratorial. If those vaccines went out and showed any signs of the crazy that they're talking about there, other scientists would blow the whistle, and they would get huge amount of personal fame from doing that. They would probably get lots of money and airtime and popularity. I mean, everyone is looking after themselves and competing with everybody else in their own fields, in different university departments, in different jurisdictions and countries around the world that are all looking for real truth through consensus. And what they're describing there can't happen without legislation, without with rule of law in place.
Humans should get used to the idea that we are no longer mysterious souls. We are now hackable animals.
So that's true. I mean, the more we learn about the science of human biology, we are hackable. I mean, certainly the fact that so many people are falling for obvious misinformation shows that we are easily manipulated if the proper tactics are used. The people who believe this video is all true, they are. But it doesn't mean that they can't get out of it with new perspectives. And that's what I hope to provide through this, is to give people a new perspective, a perspective that I had to learn. Hopefully you don't have to learn it the hard way that I did.
really believe COVID has created a window of political opportunity and maybe an epiphany.
And a central bank issued digital currency, unlike Bitcoin, which isn't controlled by a single entity, would be issued and overseen by a central bank. More than 80% of central banks around the world are researching how to leverage this technology, including the Bank of Canada, which has been studying digital currencies for 7 years. But China is the only major economy that started real-life trials.
So what? I mean, yeah, digital currencies are real. And cryptocurrencies, NFTs, blockchain, all these new technologies are coming around. A lot of people love crypto because it's decentralized. No country banking system can control it. It's easy to hide money. It's easier to avoid taxes. I mean, cryptocurrencies are here. It's a technology. Once again, governments can't do stuff without legislation. They can't enforce crypto on you. They can't make it so that you have to use crypto. They can't do stuff under behind closed doors that you won't see come out on your TV screens if you watch the news. They just can't do it. And the mainstream news, which a lot of you out there, I'm sure, are suspicious of. Listen, man, they have retraction pages. They have legal liability. They have legal departments. They hire trained journalists. Yes, they're imperfect. Yes, they have bias. Yes, but their motive is not conspiratorial. It's profit. It's easy to understand. Some of them service right-wing audiences. Some of them service left-wing audiences. But they have to tell the truth with their own spin, but they have to tell the truth as the news. Otherwise, they're legally liable. Look at Fox and the Dominion case. I mean, they started talking about how Dominion was corrupt, and they had to pay out over $800 million in a payout through the rule of law, through the legal system, because they lied. And that's how the system has its checks and balances. It's still working. It's still in place. But we have to protect it. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on here.
Of admiration I actually have for China.
The Bank of Canada highlighted...
Oh, oh, God, that quote. Trudeau is such a knob. What a stupid thing to say. Honestly, I think he was in China when he said it. I have such admiration for China. So the context for that was that people were asking him, you know, why can't we get this done in Canada? Why can't we get that done in Canada? I mean, this kind of stuff. And he was saying, well, I have admiration for China because China can do things by snapping his fingers. But we can't do that in Canada because we're a consensus-driven democracy. We have to find consensus. We have to convince people. We have to get everyone in the House Commons, at least a majority, to vote for legislation, blah, 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 blah. So even if you think that Trudeau loves this idea of becoming a dictator and bringing communism to Canada, he can't do it. Even if he admires it, he can't do it. Personally, I don't think that that's what he was actually saying. I think that he's just really sloppy with his wording. You know, he wishes that he could just sort of, he thinks he knows best. God knows he thinks he knows best, and he would like to be able to snap his fingers and make what he knows, like many leaders out there. They think they know best, but they can't do it in checks and balances, Western country with rule of law and consensus-driven democracy. Can't do it. So don't tell me that that means anything about what is happening in Canada right now. Anyways, continuing.
Remarks by Governor Tiff Macklem, who said because of COVID-19, the case for digital currency becomes more compelling.
For example...
So, yes, more compelling because COVID-19, they talked a lot about it being transmitted through touch. So tap, you know, crypto, you don't have to carry cash, you know, don't need to spread the virus. Pretty common.
In cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations.
Yeah, so I mean, we still have cash. I personally will not support any legislation that gets rid of cash. I think cash is very synonymous with freedom in a sense, right? I don't want the government to know absolutely everything about what I do and spend my money on. F them, you know. So I'm a lefty. I know lots of other lefties feel the same way as me. Lots of right-wing people, lots of centrists. The majority of people do. So, you know, if the government tries to bring that in, all hell will break loose. So I don't see what the worry is about it. As long as we know what's at stake, we fight against it legally through elections and proper protesting that doesn't sacrifice the freedoms of others for the freedom that you have and want. Then we'll keep our governments in line. But that's how it's always been, and we need to be able to continue to do that. And going down this road makes it harder to do that with misinformation and conspiracy theories taking over. And that gets into why I think this video and conspiracy theories are so dangerous in general, and why I actually fight so hard against them, because there is some really negative outcomes that can materialize because people are believing that our system is already corrupt. So let's continue.
We reviewed very, very carefully the tools at the disposal of the federal government, and we determined that we needed some additional tools.
Cut. Just take note of where that cut is.
We now have the tools to follow the money. We can see what is happening and what is being planned in real time. Now,
cut back to where she was before.
Some of those tools, we will be putting forward measures to put those tools permanently in place.
And then,
consequences are real, and they will bite.
You can't have...
All right, so that whole segment, for those who aren't Canadian and may not have seen that press conference, that was around the trucker convoy that occurred in February of 2021. I believe it was 2021, and it was yes, it was, and essentially at the end of the pandemic, people were coming to Ottawa to fight mandates and to protest. Great, you know, so it was a huge protest. Problem is that they took over Ottawa for 3 weeks. They basically made the lives of the businesses and the people who live there untenable. 500 plus arrests were made. People wearing masks were harassed. They honked their horns all night. Some of them were very unsavory characters. Some of them had a manifesto that they wanted to suspend the Canadian government and put the Senate in charge for a short period or some shit. So, I mean, that kind of crazy was inspired by this kind of video that had them convinced that there was already corruption and that our rule of law system did not exist. So, how did the government react? So the constituency, the rest of the Canadians, were terrified of these people. It looked like chaos. They were taking over our capital city. They had blockaded borders. They didn't know what was going to happen next. Other Canadians were terrified of what was happening. And what did that do? That justified the use of the Emergencies Act, where those clips come from. The Emergencies Act was used to suspend some of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms rights that people have in order to institute dramatic measures to confiscate, charge, track money, take away the freedoms for a short period of time. That piece of legislation, by the way, part of it has a mandatory public inquiry that happened afterwards in order to break down whether it was justified to be used or not. So this is my point, right? So, you know, these people came to Ottawa to protest the loss of freedom, and because they terrified the rest of Canadians, we all lost more freedom. And that's how it works. They're convinced that freedom is in danger, so they start to break the law, they start to destroy norms, they start to undermine institutions, terrifying people, which justifies governments coming in and taking away freedoms. Imagine that in the context of the United States. You know, Trump does something crazy, and the people react by rioting in the streets, giving Trump the justification to declare martial law. And then martial law takes everyone's rights away, and then it's that much harder to actually protect your rights and go to court and use rule of law to protect yourself from the government. That's how it works. So you have to work within the system, because fear begets fear begets fear. It's an escalator that continues to go. The trucker convoy people are great people. I know some of them. Lovely people. Conspiracy theorists like I was, terrified that the world that they're afraid of already exists. I'm telling you, it does not. Our rule of law system still is in balance. It's struggling. It has its challenges here and there. It's not perfect, but it's still there. You know it is because there was a public inquiry after the fact. You know it is because people are being sued. People are being charged. People are being held accountable. And media is making sure that this is being brought out. And you, as a trucker convoy person that thinks the government is already corrupt, your videos are still online. Your doors aren't getting kicked in the middle of the night. So if you continue down this road and you don't work within the system, you beget fear that begets fear that justifies governments taking more control, and the cycle goes. And that's how we get dictatorships. That's how we get the authoritarians you are all afraid of. We reap what we sow.
Programmability, units of central bank currency with expiry dates, where the government decides that units of central bank money can be used to purchase some things, but not other things that it deems less desirable. We're developing through technology.
Once again, someone's spitballing, the possibilities for use. Maybe he's even giddy over it. It doesn't mean it's going to become legislation. He's just some guy spouting off on a forum somewhere.
An ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's, where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
Oh, so there's the implication. We don't have it operational, as though he's a government guy that they're trying to institute it at a macro level in countries. Bullshit. They don't have it operational yet in their little test unit. He's spitballing, and of course they can track everything now. Everything's digital. They can track it if they want to. The question is there legislation that protects our privacy? If our privacy isn't protected, is there legislation that allows us to sue the people that have infringed our property? Is there criminal law that protects against excesses of the private and public sector? Is there judges that are sworn to uphold the Charter of Rights and Freedoms or the Constitution, and that are unswayable because they have taken an oath and take their job seriously? They've done it their whole lives? Yes. Yes, there is. So that kind of stuff is just blatant fear-mongering. People can talk all they want. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. They're just a person on a forum somewhere. And, maybe dictators around the world, like Chinese people who've instituted social credit, which actually is terrifying, will say, oh, that's a great idea. Let's do that. Let's do that in China. But they can't do that here. Okay? They're not going to, because they won't get elected, and they'll be thrown in jail if they start breaking laws, just like Trump is.
You put the passports or the IDs and the CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, together, and they can, if they decide you can't transact more than 5 kilometers from your home, you can't transact more than 5 kilometers from your home. If you can't, if they don't want you driving your car, you can't drive your car. If they don't want you buying pizza, you can't buy pizza. One great activist said that the implementation of the passports is the end of human liberty in the West, and that is in fact true if we let this control grid go in. Ladies and gentlemen, don't let that happen.
So there you go. There's a press girl, a press woman, saying this type of thing is way too much control for the government to have. So if you don't want them to have it, then don't vote the people in that are going to do that kind of stuff. It's as simple as that. She's warning us about the dangers of technology. There's tons of dangers of technology. There always has been. When cameras came out, look at the George Orwell 1984. I mean, surveillance society, facial recognition. We're already going down that road. as long as the legislation is in place, there's checks and balances. As long as the judiciary is independent, there's checks and balances. There's ways. I know not everyone can afford a lawyer, and they don't get justice the way wealthy people do. But it's an imperfect system, but that doesn't mean it's not a system that still protects everyone. Because guess what? If they do something against my civil rights, then they could do something against a rich person's civil rights too. That's why there's not-for-profits that will pay for my protection, because it inadvertently protects them, the wealthy people that want their rights and freedoms protected as well. So the system, the Western system, is intact. It's not perfect. It needs to be constantly monitored and improved. We got to be careful not to go down the roads that some of those people are warning us about. That's why you elect people that hopefully will use the power they have in a responsible way. If they don't, we kick them the hell out. And we are smart enough not to elect them again. Hint, hint, don't vote for Donald Trump, please, God. So, in any case, I get animated. This stuff is really key. You know, I am a news junkie, and news, especially these days, does make me feel anxious, but I get rid of that anxiousness by working the problem. It's what Twitter is. It's a bit of therapy for me. I mean, it makes me feel as though I'm doing something. It doesn't really matter how many people out there read it, to be honest. And in a sense, it doesn't matter how many people watch this. I mean, I'm doing it because it feels like it needs to be done. I hope that it can go out there and help. I'm not the greatest orator in the world. I haven't used every point out there. I'm really just a working class Joe that barely made it out of high school, but I have been blessed with some perspectives on my life that have, and a willingness to learn and grow that I think has given me perspective that I can share that can help folks. This video is about creating fear and rage that will undermine the system, the gains that we've already gotten, in order to escalate and escalate and escalate till it comes to the point where we really will start losing our freedoms. And that's what scares me the most. We need to trust in our fellow citizens that the people, most of the people in government are ethical and are in there for the right reasons. And that they can't be bought off as easy as you all think. That that, you know what, it's hard enough to keep a surprise party secret. You know, the whistleblowers and conspiracies. I mean, they just get blown wide open. The more people you involve, the more there's going to be whistleblowers. The more there's going to be scandal. And the system is set up in such a way that competition will mean that people will want to get the information out, because that gets them the attention that they can leverage into value and dollars. So the system's sound, but it's creaky, and we do have to be on guard that we do not let foreign agents or people that have been duped or people that are trying to make money by siloing other folks off online. We can't let them have their way and make things worse, because chaos breeds chaos. All right, wow, what a long bit. I feel a little bit better. I hope you do too. And thanks for watching. I will be interviewing folks again, unless another video like this comes up that really inspires me to do something else like this. Please comment, please subscribe to the Newsload. The Newsload is something special too, I think, that will help the world. But thanks for watching, and bye for now.
This is the Newsload.